one of the biggest things I wanted to be able to accomplish today is understanding. So as we go through, yes, we are going to have some areas for questions, but I don't want to go blazing past anything that you guys really have interest in. So just throw up your hand, say, hey, I've got a question, whatever, because I want you guys to understand. Fair enough? Yeah. All right. Small investments prevent large losses. Who's heard of a company that's been hacked? Yeah, pretty prevalent these days. Many companies think that they're too small to be hacked. Sorry, man. I'm used to my notes being on a podium or something like that. So. Oh, that's all right. Thank you. When in reality, they are easy prey. For example, the lion in Africa doesn't go after the largest, strongest gazelle. It looks for the small, the weak, the slow. Because just like in nature, things take the path of least resistance, and so do hackers. That's why, as small business owners, you guys are the prey. Small investments prevent large losses. According to IBM, 95% of all breaches are caused by human error, someone clicking on something they shouldn't. For example, a local company, this isn't on the East Coast, West Coast, anything like that, here in St. Joseph. We got a call on a Monday morning. This company had been hacked. We went out there, we sat down with them in the conference room. The owner was there, their IT person was there, and their accounts payable person was there. Accounts payable person was a woman that was visibly upset. You could tell she'd been just bawling her eyes out. Her face was red and she was still trembling a little bit. This is about 9 o'clock in the morning at this time. What had occurred is that she works Monday through Thursday. And this last Thursday, being an accounts payable person, she also does wire transfers for the company. So she was on the bank's website doing wire transfers, www.mybank.com. And then all of a sudden, it stops working. And that's strange. So she closes it out, opens it back up, www.mybank.com, and enters in her credentials. Doesn't let her in. That's strange. It's the end of the day. I'll deal with this on Monday. What had happened is that her computer was infected with what's called a keylogger. A keylogger records and transmits every keystroke. www.mybank.com, my username, my password, got sent directly to the hackers. The hackers logged in, changed the password, and this is where they really got it. And this, in my opinion, the bank has some liability here as well. They also, the hackers were also from within the regular portal of the website, changed the contact information for that company, okay? This company had an agreement with the bank. Any wire transfers over $25,000 required a verbal confirmation via phone call from the bank, okay? $75,000 transfer is requested. So that hits the bank picks up the phone. What do? They call for confirmation. They called the hackers because the hackers were able to update that contact information. And of course they said, yes, this is legitimate. Thank you very much, please let it go through. So $75,000 in a couple blinks was gone. And the way that this works, it's not just, they don't just transfer it from one account to another. They have automated systems set up. So as soon as it hits this count, it goes to 10, it gets spread to 10 accounts. Those 10 go to another 10, and all of a sudden, the $75,000 is typically broken down into $100 increments, of which you can buy for $50. Basically it's like $100 Visa gift cards that you can buy for $50 on the dark web. So something that didn't cost them anything, they're making $37,500 on like that. So that's one of the instances that can occur. So how much would you pay to prevent losing $75,000? Small investments prevent large losses. Who's heard of email phishing? Email phishing. There's a couple different kinds. Some of it is like, you know, the old ones from back in the day. Hey, I'm a Nigerian friend, so I'm trying to get out, and you know, all those kinds of things. You know, those really don't work that well anymore. People have wised up to them. But when you see one that says, well, your Netflix account has been compromised, please log in and click this link and you know, enter in your username and password and whatnot. Well, the link's not actually real. It's going to a hacker that created a site that looks like Netflix, and they get your username and password, and then they take over your account and they sell that on the dark web as well. That's just a fairly simple phishing example. However, they can get quite a bit more entailed. There's types that are called spear phishing, okay? Many people have profiles on LinkedIn. Their companies have their websites, and it lists out who's the CEO, who's the COO, who's the CFO, all these types of things, because don't you know who I am? Well, the hackers use this against you because it's very easy to get that person's email address, especially the CFO, and to be able to say, hey, you can put together a real easy email to spoof or to fake like it's you, an email, put that company's logo on it, and you know, you send it to somebody. Hey, Jan in accounts payable, I need you to go buy, you know, $1,000 gift cards. Sadly, it works. It happens a lot that people just fall for these things, and it just it gets worse and worse. In 2020, the FBI's IC3, or the Internet Crime Complaint Center, in 2020 logged 800,000 internet crime reports here in the US. That's up 300,000 from last year. And the statistics are put somewhere in the area of only about 50% of internet crimes are actually reported. So if you think about how more widespread that is even then. For example, as I said, for spear phishing, we have a client that they were just involved, their identity was faked. So let's call them client A. Well, client B receives a spear phishing email that appears to be from client A saying, hey, we need our payment. Here's our new wire transfer information. And this is local again. We need payment. Here's our new wire transfer information. The accounts payable person at this company thought nothing of it. The email looked legitimate. It had the corporate logo on it. It was the right name in the email. So they sent the wire transfer. $110,000. Call who? Client A calls client B. Where's our payment? You know, you're overdue. Client B says, hey, we paid you. No, you didn't. They paid the hackers. Many people fall for these scams primarily for one reason. Most people are good. Most people don't think like criminals. And it's very hard for us to think about just things that we daily interact with where we need to be that aware of things. And how much would you pay to not lose $110,000? Small investments prevent large losses. Cybersecurity seems daunting. because you haven't been trained in the virtual world. But it's easy if you know how. It's very easy if you know how. In the physical world, as we're brought up as kids, look both ways before you cross the street. Don't open the door for strangers. Kind of like, don't click on something you're not sure about. And for some of us guys, don't stick the butter knife into the electrical socket. You know, these are all things that we're all taught about the physical world growing up. And it's your responsibility to educate yourselves on a continuous basis, because it's always changing and evolving, about the virtual world and the challenges and threats that are out there. Small investments prevent large losses. When you've got a fire extinguisher, very small investment, but it can potentially save a huge amount of loss by not losing your home or your business, or God forbid your family, should something really drastic occur. Fire extinguishers are extremely inexpensive in relative terms. The locks on your home are a small investment that prevents large losses. Keeps those predators from sneaking in your kid's room at night, or stealing your stuff, or whatever it is. But it's something that we wouldn't even think about not having, because everybody wants to avoid loss. And being educated about this is what helps do that. Just like the whole point of insurance, those premiums are small investments to prevent large losses. Who's heard of the dark web? Very simply, and I think comically, it's kind of like a Craigslist for criminals. On the dark web, you can get drugs, you can get guns, human trafficking, you can get a hitman. And for $2, I can get your password and your username. Those are widely available because it's very simple. People don't take the necessary precautions that they should to protect themselves. It's very much like, well, I have keys to my house and I just leave them all over the place. And by the way, I have my address on them as well. Those are some of the things that are very easy to do. Who hates changing their password? Well, I actually have a little bit of good news for you. If you meet the criteria. According to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, now the recommendation is that as long as your password is 15 characters or more, you're not using it on multiple sites, and you know that it hasn't been breached. And you can find that out by having dark web monitoring and searching the dark web for there's services that provide that to tell you, whether or not you've been breached or not. But if they do that, now the recommendation is that you don't have to change your password because it's potentially not exposed. And the longer a password is, the harder it is to crack. Now, who hates especially the gobbledygook passwords that are using all these special characters and everything, and it's just basically an alphabet soup of confusion? You don't have to do that either. What you should do, and what is recommended, is to use passphrases. Different types of words, or basically whole sentences, that they don't even have to have special characters or numbers or whatever. But when they're long enough, when they're so long, they're too complex. It'll take them thousands of years to be able to figure out a 30-character password. I think, what was it? Jeremiah was a bullfrog. Question mark. Nobody's going to hack that one. It's too long. It's too complex. Now, if your system is compromised, or say if you use that password at your bank or something like that, and they get breached, then that password is potentially out there. But as far as a hacker brute force attacking you, trying to figure it out, it's not going to happen. So have long passwords, but Don't make it, if anybody's ever seen on Facebook where they's like, well, who was your first teacher? Who is this? They got all these questions that go down there. Where did you go to high school? And all these different questions that they ask you on Facebook. Dear God, do not fill those out. Because what that is, that's data mining. That's people going in, seeing your user profile. You filled out all this personal information about you that many people create their passwords from. What are your kids' names? What year were they born? What year were you born? What month? And people readily give up this information. And that's part of how they get you. It's part of social engineering. They don't necessarily have to hack your computer. They just have to hack you. There's many examples on the web. You can go to YouTube and look up some of the examples of social engineering where somebody just picks up a cell phone, calls a cell phone provider, and within about 2-3 minutes they own that person's account because they convinced the person on the other end working at AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, whoever it was, that they were legitimately it and they were in a bind and, oh, please help me. It's amazing how quickly an account can get just social engineered and taken over. Colonial Pipeline. Anybody hear about this? This was back in May. The whole southeast there, no gas. The entire pipelines were empty. I think it took 5 or 6 days to repressurize them and get the fuel back going. There was fights, there was lines, all types of things like that were just creating chaos because somebody did something pretty stupid. And honestly, it is completely and utterly avoidable. What happened is the hackers went to dark web and spent $2. They found a username and password for a Colonial Pipeline. They attempted to remote in. How about that? The $2 key they just bought works. The account for that username and password, even though that person was no longer there, they were still active in the system. Think about like this, like an employee was terminated, but you left them with the key. So that person's still on the okay to be here list, but the key's out there. And somebody came in and impersonated them. They were in that system for weeks before they actually sprung it on them and said, ha, gotcha. Because the systems, this is a legitimate account. This is one that should be able to be here. But because of poor, excuse me, but because of poor hygiene, housekeeping, that account had been there for years, still active, and the credentials had never been changed. So they ended up having to pay several $1 million in ransom to be able to get back up and running, to get that encryption key. For those of you that aren't aware what ransomware is, there are different versions, but the primary piece of it is it goes in, if you want to think about it like this, puts a little lock on every single file and encrypts it. And without that key, none of your stuff's open. Your QuickBooks, your other business files, who you owe, who owes you, all these types of things, you can't open. You cannot open a single thing because it goes through and it doesn't alert you, because it does, until its job is done. Now, sorry, she threw me a sign and it messed me up and I had to reset. Anyway, it does not alert you until its job is done, until everything's locked down. And then it comes up and says, pay us. And these aren't 13-year-olds in basements or anything like this. This is big business. Cyber crime, the dark web, is the 3rd largest economy on the planet behind the United States and China. That's how big it is. There are 800 numbers. They have whole call centers dedicated to cybercrime, to ransomware. Now, just like nesting dolls or an onion, you've got all these different layers. And that's how you got to kind of think about cybersecurity. As I said, small investments, and I do want to say this is not all inclusive because there's different businesses have different needs. If you have a DoD contract, you're going to have to be SMMC certified here pretty soon, or you do not have a DoD contract anymore. If you're not there, you lose it, and you're probably not ever going to get it back. So that's one of the big things going on right now. But one of the number one, a commercial grade firewall. A firewall, you know, you've heard of firewalls, you've heard of routers. A router is just a very courteous device that says, oh, where do you want to go? Well, here, right over here. A firewall goes, hey, stop. Who are you? Identify yourself. Are you on the access list? And if you're not coming in. Business continuity solutions or a backup solution. Business continuity, just like it says, keeps you up and running. If your server puffs smoke, don't care. We've got you back up and running in 15 minutes. Your business is going to continue to run. If you just have a backup solution, you've got your files, but the ability to execute or run those files is not there. You've got your files, that's great, but now you have to rebuild your infrastructure to be able to actually use them. Antivirus, anti-malware, I think that's fairly reasonable and understandable by most people that defines that. To use strong passphrases. If you want to use Jeremiah was a bullfrog, that's great, but you could make that falls, the rain in Spain falls mainly on the plane. And you can put spaces in them as well. You don't have to make it all one word. And you can add whatever kind of special characters in, whatever you want to do. I've actually even had some of my passwords when I try to create a new one that have actually been too long for the systems. But it was an easy one for me to remember because it was just a phrase. Multi-factor or two-factor authentication. Okay, a lot of times now when you go to log in your bank, you get a text message with a code, okay? That's a form of two-factor authentication. As a business owner, this is something that is not only coming, it's here and you should have it. Because it is so easy to get owned. My wife and I were down in Tampa here a month ago or so, and on her phone, boop, boop, somebody's trying to log into her account. Decline. So, even though somebody was trying to hack into her, because that doesn't happen until the password's there, she was able to decline that and save her from the breach. Operating system patches and updates. Everybody gets so annoyed with the Windows updates, yes? What the problem is, the reason why that you need to be patient with those, is those things only come out when a vulnerability has been discovered. So those patches, those updates, are plugging those holes. So that's why it's so important to do your updates. And as I said in the beginning, cybersecurity training, it is the most important, and it should be continuous. It shouldn't just be a one and done, because the threat landscape is constantly evolving. My company we are in my 19th year running my company, and none of this stuff was even a thing back then. Everything has changed so much. So that's my spiel. Does anybody have any questions or? Yes, sir.
Incognito. Google gives me a choice. I can go incognito. Is that worthwhile? Making a difference?
Yes, it does. It helps prevent some of the tracking elements of websites. So yes, it does help. Yes, sir.
Well, the police department do something about it. I had mine hacked and went to Josh at the police station. Wouldn't even take a report.
The reason for that is that it's almost an unstoppable crime, because the criminals, most of them, or I'd even go as far as saying 95% of them, aren't in the United States. They're in Russia, they're in Iran, they're in North Korea, China, all these places, and the difficulty in being able to track it back, you know, sorry guys, this isn't the TV shows where, haha, you know, 2 seconds later, I'm tracking them down in Beijing, you know, it doesn't work that way.
I still wonder why he didn't at least take a report. He said, I'm too busy with child pornography, and I had somebody sending out emails from my email address, and it wasn't showing up in my sent mail. And I said, well, what if somebody sends out pornography in my name and they come back and get me? I said, at least put a report down. He said, no, I won't do it.
Yeah, I can't,
That's part of the problem.
I can't answer why the officer, you know, made that
Like I said, it was
decision.
Josh, and he's in charge of that up there at the police department. And I solved the problem. I don't use a phone, I don't use an email address, I don't use a checking account except what my social security pension puts in the bank. And that's a debit card.
All right.
So that was my way of solving it.
And it did, go off the grid. Anybody else have another question? Okay, well, I'd like to say thank you very much. Oh, yes, ma'am.
What about, okay, so the stuff you're talking about, does it affect the iPad and the phones and stuff like that?
Yes. Your iPhones, your iPads, your Macs, your Androids, all of these are just as vulnerable. There's, you know, many years ago, there was a lot of hype basically saying that Macs didn't get viruses. They couldn't get viruses. That wasn't the case at all, because I can tell you they absolutely can. What it was is that if you're putting out a product trying to make money, who's your audience gonna be? The Macs only have about a 15% market share. So if you're trying to hit somebody, you're gonna go after the Windows computer that have about an 85% market share. So that's why there's some of that as far as Macs and Androids and everything else, and yes, absolutely, all day long they can get on.
So what you do for it, do you protect the phone and your iPad and your computer? Is that what your company does?
Well, what my company does, we're a managed services provider, which means that we're an outsourced IT department for manufacturing companies, for law enforcement agencies, those types of things, small governments, libraries, specialty industries like that is what we do. We don't do any type of residential work. We're located just a half a block over here on Illinois Avenue, but that's what we do, is we're that outsourced IT department.
And well, Tim, thank you.
Yeah, well,
We'll give him a,
got one more, real quick.
are you gonna stay?
How about that? Yes, very good.
Why don't you stay and they can ask you some questions
Certainly.
afterwards, because I'd like for Seth to stand up here.
So you're telling me to have a
give
cool
his
smile, shut up.
presentation. You'll have him locked out.
All right, let me get him out of here and get his stuff up for him.
Get Seth up.
Yeah, how much, when do you want me to,
We go till 8 o'clock.
is that how long you want me to speak? Oh,
Well,
I'm so
or
sorry for the rest.
You done messed up,
use your
April.
judgment on that, I think
Okay,
she
yeah,
had you
sure.
scheduled for an hour,
Yeah,
but
yeah, that's perfect.
you know.
I'm happy to do that. Well, while he's switching that over, I'll introduce myself. My name
Please.
is Seth Sladen. I'm an attorney at Murphy, Taylor, Siemens and Elliott here in St. Joe. I've been here in the St. Joe area for, gosh, a little over 6 years now. So just piggybacking off a lot of what Tim said, I think is really good information. Working in the legal field, I see a lot of this stuff, and I don't know if anybody here is on Instagram, but knows of Hush Puppy, the Instagram influencer. But he was actually one of these guys that was part of these, I call them business email compromise schemes, where they get together to hack businesses, and you wouldn't believe how much money they steal through there, and actually know of an employer that was the victim of one of these schemes. So what had happened is, I don't know, it's probably like a Netflix email, something like that seemed really innocuous. It was clicked on and nothing bad happened. But what was going on behind the scenes was this hacker sat there for about 3 to 4 weeks and was taken in just monitoring emails, learning the lingo of this business, how the hacked account liked to communicate, how they signed their name, the grammar they used in their sentences. And the hacker set up a rule in his inbox to where all messages regarding this particular type of product that this business was in the market for purchasing, which was pretty substantial and worth a lot of money, would go into a hidden folder that this person didn't know how to access. And so, long story short, they were able to trick an employee who was also a family member that they'd known for 40-some years into wiring a lot of money to this fake account, and almost got him to do it a second time. And it was only because that employee went and said, hey, which account do you want me to pull this money out of for this purchase, that he said, what purchase? And by then it was too late, never got the money back. And you're never, you know, I don't blame the police, you know, for, you know, whether they should or shouldn't take a report, but it's just, you know, we took them to court, but I can get a judgment that says somebody owes someone $10 million, but if I can't find the person who took it, that's just, that piece of paper is not worth the ink it's printed on. And unfortunately, that's the situation they found themselves in. So I thought the phrase, small investments, you know, large rewards is absolutely true. Because there's just the little steps you can take will save you a lot of trouble. So,
Here's the presenter, just left and right there.
yeah, so, and on that, just, you know, from my personal experience and what we do, and because I'm not